Warning, this fic contains many dark and adult themes. For the full list provided by the author, please check the description below and proceed with caution. Welcome back, this is Veritaserum by Severitus 812, JessalynMichele, Book 3 of Harry Potter and 7 Years of Chaos. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy, and subscribe for future stories. Please check the description for a full list of tags, and the link to drop a kudos for the original author. With that out of the way, let's get started. Summary. Does Snape really think that Harry is worried about another madman after him? He can handle himself, thanks. Changes in the gang and at Hogwarts are running rampant as Snape tries to deal with a ward who he believes may be struggling with more than just his copious amounts of past trauma. Harry wants everyone to leave him alone and let him find Sirius Black for a friendly chat. Susan fantasizes about what she'll do if she even so much as sees one hair of Sirius Black's head near her best friend. Hermione and Theo just want to read. Alone. Together. And Remus Lupin wonders what on earth happened to James' son to create the chaotic child he now meets. Welcome back to Year 3. A small note, as far as I can tell, this fic jumps straight in at Chapter 2, so not mistakes here with skipping Chapter 1. Chapter 2, A Peaceful Summer. Severus Snape was in his potions lab, experimenting with a new potion he had collaborated on with a peer. They were planning on using venom from a basilisk to create a cure for the Muggle disease cancer. The other potioneer, Wayne Ramsey, a potions master in the States that Severus had studied for his masters with, felt confident that his research on the disease, combined with Severus' potioneer skills and supply of the venom, could create a cure that would eradicate the disease altogether. Cancer is caused when cells divide uncontrollably and spread into surrounding tissues. Imagine if we could alter the venom to target and kill only those cancerous cells. Once the cells were eradicated, then it would just be a matter of fixing damage already caused by the cells. It would be a miracle. Severus thought that if they were able to create the potion, then the only problem remaining would be to find more basilisk venom for future batches. Though the one basilisk Potter had given him, and refused to liquefy into his own assets, held enough potion for many failed batches and hundreds of successful ones, it would eventually run out, and they would be back at square one. And Severus certainly would not count on Potter encountering another 60-foot-long basilisk to procure more. Severus supposed that was a bridge they would cross if the potion was even successful. Creating a mixture that would alter the venom to target specific human cells without creating a mixture that was toxic on its own was proving to be quite a challenge. But Severus was nothing if not determined. Crash! Severus sighed, determined, yet his creative muses were undeniably being held hostage by his soon-to-be teenaged ward. Harry, he called as he left his lab in search of the demon. Are you all right? Fine, you don't need to come in here, Potter called back quickly. Which Severus knew meant he absolutely needed to go to the kitchen, where it sounded as if Potter currently was. He stepped in the doorway and stopped at the mess in front of him. What in Merlin's name are you doing, child? He demanded. Every counter in the kitchen was covered in baking sheets, batter, and an outrageous amount of flour. Potter himself had what looked like chocolate batter down the front of his shirt, and was currently attempting to mop up more of it by hand. I said you didn't need to come in, Potter huffed, standing up and stepping backwards into what Severus is relatively confident is egg yolk. That is not an answer, Severus said tightly. Where is Mavis? Dunno, Potter said airily as he rinsed the washcloth off in the sink. Told him I wanted to try baking, didn't I? He got mad at me and stomped off, probably cleaning the bathroom again. Severus took a deep breath and counted to 10 very slowly in his mind. He reminded himself that so far Potter had been an ideal housemate. He was polite, respected Severus' privacy, kept his flu calls quiet, informed Severus where he was going before he left the house, and was usually quiet. Why are you baking? He asked when he felt much less irritated with the boy. I'm practicing, Potter smiled. Neville's birthday is in a month, right? So I thought, hey Harry, you should do something wicked because Neville is wicked. But I couldn't think of anything until Mavis was making muffins this morning and bam. Potter clapped his hands together, apparently for dramatic effect. I knew I should make him a cake. It would mean way more coming from me than Mavis, right? Because I'm Neville's friend. Yeah. Severus gaped at Potter as he beamed up at him after his rant. This was perhaps the most Potter has said the entire summer so far. The fact that he said it all so quickly Severus could barely understand him just added to Severus' current surprise. How much sugar have you eaten? He asked. A Potter hopped up on sweets would likely be a problem. Severus glanced around their destroyed kitchen and corrected himself, more of a problem. None, Potter laughed. Just a good day, isn't it, sir? Severus, he corrected him. He'd been trying for the last 2 weeks since their return to Spinner's End for Potter to refer to him as Severus in their home. Of course, he'd also been trying to get Potter to decorate his room, as he had the rest of the house, with no progress being made there either. He stared suspiciously at Potter, and tried to pin down the child's current mood. Potter had been visibly on edge the first couple of days of the holidays, and had been less so once Severus outlined clear rules expectations of him. Tilda. Harry, I would like to talk to you about something, he'd said during dinner on their second night home. Potter tensed up immediately and glanced behind himself towards the kitchen door. Okay, he said slowly, talk about what? Severus ignored Potter's obvious anxiety and kept his tone conversational. I believe living together will be much easier on you if we have some sort of rules established. Potter crossed his arms, tucking his fists underneath them, and Severus saw how tightly coiled his muscles now were. What kind of rules? He asked, his jaw clenching with agitation. Severus hesitated. Perhaps rules is not the right word to use here. I simply believe we should have some expectations for each other during the holidays. When he saw Potter relax slightly, he patted himself on the back for, once again, correctly identifying the child's source of anxiety. Okay, what expectations? Severus thought for a moment of reasonable requests to make of a pubescent boy who had been independent his entire life. Firstly, I would appreciate it if you informed me before you left the house, he said carefully. You are free to flee to your friends' homes, and I would be happy to side along you if you would rather. I would likely become stressed if you were abruptly missing from our home with no prior explanation. I will of course give you the same courtesy. Potter relaxed more, uncrossing his arms. I can go see my friends, he said hesitantly, whenever I want. Of course, Severus assured him. You are not a prisoner in our home. You are welcome to go wherever you please within reason. I would simply like you to inform me first, is that acceptable? Yeah, Potter nodded happily, that's acceptable. Severus could not wait to inform Narcissa of how easy handling his new ward was. I would also like you to complete your summer homework, perhaps allowing me to look it over once you are finished. And Severus tried to think of any other role expectations that he would like to make clear. And do not enter my potions lab without implicit permission directly beforehand, as I typically have unstable potions brewing that can react volatility to the slightest disturbance. Potter was nodding along eagerly. And I will give you the same privacy that I would appreciate we could agree to not enter each other's private bedrooms without permission. He suddenly remembered Potter's commonly occurring nightmares, anxiety, rages, and panic attacks. Unless the owner of the bedroom is in distress, he tacked on hastily. Sounds brill, Potter said. So can I go to Ron's to play Quidditch tomorrow, sir? He said he's leaving next week on a trip to Egypt, so if I don't go now then I might not get to go at all. You do not require permission, Severus stressed. He himself had been an independent teenager, both by necessity and through personal choice, and he did not want Potter to see Severus as someone who was attempting to restrict his movements. You may just inform me, preferably the night before if you have that much notice, and as long as you are not traveling to bars or some other place you do not belong, I will simply say be safe, see you when you return. Potter hesitated, his eyes tracking Severus' movements nervously, as if worried that this was somehow a trick. I'm going to Ron tomorrow, he all but whispered, watching Severus' hands through his eyelashes. We aren't going to a bar, we're going to play Quidditch with the twins at his house. Be safe, I shall see you when you return, Severus had said calmly before taking a sip of his water. Since Potter returned from the Weasley home, his cheeks red and his hair in complete disarray, and saw that there was nothing awaiting him aside from Severus asking about his day, he had relaxed completely in his presence, though he had never been quite this perky. Why are you looking at me like that? Potter laughed. I bought a cookbook. He gestured to the mess in the room. This will all be edible when I'm done. Maybe. Potter laughed again and Severus attempted to quit staring at him so warily. If Potter was relaxed enough here to make an outrageous mess and ramble about baking, why should Severus complain? It was a good sign. It meant that Potter was trusting him and acting more his age than he typically did. Very well, Severus said slowly. Although you apparently need reminded that you are a wizard. He sent a pointed look at the washcloth in Potter's hand. Oh yeah, Potter laughed again. He scrunched his nose up and then smiled at Severus as the mess on the floor disappeared. Tada, he cried. Magic. Severus slowly backed out of the kitchen doorway. Potter was a menace when he was in a mood and apparently a menace when he was. He wondered if Lucius would trade him teenagers for a few days. Surely Draco was much simpler to handle than Potter is. "I will be in my labs," he called. "I'll bring you a cupcake when they're done. I'm gonna make raspberry, they're your favorite, right?" Severus sighed and lightly tapped his head on the wall. "Thank you, Harry." No, he would not trade Potter for Draco. He doubted whether Draco, in 13 years of spending time together, had ever noticed his preference in pastry flavors. Potter was a menace, but Severus was quite fond of the brat. Severus rose quite early the next morning, eager to use the extra time reading through old potions manuals, research for his current experiments. He quietly crept past Potter's closed door and made his way to the kitchen. He checked the time and saw that it was barely 5 a.m. He would have at least 2 hours to work before attending breakfast with Potter. Severus made himself a cappuccino, thankful again for Potter's ridiculous purchase, as they have both become accustomed to the convenience in the last few weeks. He sat at the table, enjoying the tranquility of the morning. The few hours before sunrise were Severus' favorite. It was dark, soothing, and promised an entire day with the possibility of peace. He summoned his books with a lazy flick of his wand, and slowly worked through the more recent ones, making notes as he went. He was midway through a promising chapter on mutating blood cells with a modified transfiguration base potion when Potter came bursting through the back door. "You're awake," Potter said, surprised. Severus checked the time and was startled to see that it was already 7:15. He tasted his cappuccino and was disgusted to discover that the drink was now cold. "I am," he said, turning back to Potter. "As are you, apparently." Potter's cheeks were flushed and he clutched his broomstick in his hand. "I didn't hear you go out. Have you been flying long?" Potter shrugged, moving to the counter to make himself a drink. "Been flying for a while," he said cheerily. "I'm not sure what time I went out." Severus watched him skeptically. He had risen at 5, and he was sure that, no matter how immersed in his research he had been, he would have heard Potter leave the house. "Is it not difficult to fly in the dark?" Severus asked, keeping his tone light as he tried to ascertain how long Potter had been outside. "A bit," Potter said, sitting across from him with his mug, "but I'm trying to come up with a way to make myself see in the dark. Listen, I thought of it last night. Luna said that a lot of animals can see at night. She calls them nocturnal, isn't that brill? And so I figured if we can transfigure cat ears onto people, then why can't I transfigure my eyes into ones more like an animal, right? So while I was flying I just focused real hard on making myself see in the dark, but it hasn't worked yet." Potter held his arm up to show Severus a shallow scrape running down his forearm. "See," he said, barely taking a breath. "I'm still flying into tree branches." Severus took in Potter's flushed cheeks, his excited eyes, and his bright smile. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked slowly. "You must not have slept much if you were out flying before I had even risen." Potter waved his hand dismissively before taking a deep drink out of his mug. "Feelings," he scoffed. "Just couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the stuff I want to do today, and I figured I might as well get started. And one of the things on your incredibly important to-do list was attempting to perform dangerous and untested magic on yourself while 50 feet in the air," Severus asked dryly. "Yep." Severus slowly counted to 10 as he stared incredulously at Potter, who was calmly sipping his drink. "That is incredibly dangerous," he said. "Attempting human transfiguration alone is dangerous enough. Doing it in the air, on a broomstick, borders suicidal." Potter laughed at that. "I'm not trying to kill myself," he said mockingly, as if it were not a constant fear of Severus since a mere 6 months ago. "I just had the idea and wanted to try it out." Severus was interrupted from finding a way to scold Potter, without causing him to recede from his cheerful mood, by the arrival of a darkly muttering Mavis. "Oh, is Master Potter not making himself breakfast?" Mavis said, with his eyes wide. Mavis thought since Master doesn't trust him to make his friend a cake, that maybe Master doesn't trust Mavis to make breakfast either. "Dramatic," Potter mumbled. "I told you I was sorry," he said in a clearer voice. "I just had the idea yesterday and needed to try it out. I'm sure you're a much better baker than I am." Mavis huffed and started loudly pulling pans out of cabinets. "Of course Mavis is a better baker. Mavis is an elf and Master is a madman." He glared over his shoulder at Potter and added, "A madman who needs to be eating breakfast." "Can't." Potter jumped to his feet and put his mug in the sink before grabbing his broom. "I need to get a shower, I stink." "You should eat something," said Severus. "I will, after I get a shower." Severus watched as Potter practically skipped out of the kitchen. "Master is having no appreciation for Mavis," the elf muttered. Severus sighed and grabbed his stack of books. He would clearly get more work done in his lab this morning. Mr. Snoop is not eating breakfast from Mavis either, because Mr. Snoop is a bad influence on Master, Mavis shouted as Severus snuck away. Severus was fond of Potter, and Merlin knows that Mavis makes his life much easier, but Severus remembers summers spent in absolute silence, where he was able to work for days at a time, uninterrupted, and feels a faint twinge of annoyance knowing those days are over. He got set up in his lab, his research books stacked nicely, when he was interrupted again by Potter knocking on his door. "Enter." "Hello again," Potter smiled, his hair soaking wet from his shower. "Just wanted to tell you I'm going to Diagon Alley to meet up with Susan." "Thank you," Severus said. "I will see you when you return. Be safe." "I'll do my best," Potter laughed, closing the door behind him gently. Severus shook his head at Potter's newfound sunny disposition. Perhaps if he remains in this mood, they may actually have a peaceful, if slightly irksome, summer together. Severus spent the morning, and most of the afternoon, locked in his lab working on the background research required for a potion this complex. He took a short break around noon to grab a quick lunch. A still angry Mavis informed him that Potter was still gone, and Master didn't bother to eat Mavis' breakfast. Severus quickly retreated, uninterested in listening to a mad elf's ramblings. Potter was likely stuffing himself with junk from the vendors in Diagon Alley. He was irritated to find out that although the venom would require a transfigurative base, the potion itself would need to be medicinal if it were to be administered to Muggles eventually. While Wixen could handle Muggle medicines, though typically requiring much higher dosages due to the magic that causes their metabolism to burn much faster, Muggles could not tolerate potions. It had the same result as feeding them slow-acting poison. Eventually, their organs would shut down and they would die from it. He slammed his notebook closed, harder than may have been necessary, and went to clear his mind. Potter looked up from where he was sprawled on the floor, a mess of parchments surrounding him, when Severus walked in the room. "All done for today then?" he asked. "Probably," Severus huffed, still thinking over how to make a transfigurative potion base medicinal enough to adjust for Muggles, but without losing its properties. "Wanna go flying?" "What?" Severus pulled himself from his swirling thoughts at Potter's absurd offer. "Yeah, flying," Potter said, sitting up with a grin. "It's good to clear your head, you know, and it's nice out and I can show you this cool trick I've been." "Okay, fine," Severus agreed, more to shut up Potter's excited ramble than any desire to fly. "I suppose my broom has been relocated to the shed." "Yes," Potter jumped up and was bouncing on the balls of his feet eagerly. "Come on, let's go." Severus was incredibly bemused at Potter's energy. He must have made multiple trips to Fortescue's while he was with Miss Bones. Severus followed as Potter practically sprinted out the back door. Potter quickly snatched the brooms and handed Severus his old and rarely used comet. "Come on, watch this." Potter jumped on his nimbus and immediately took off to the air. Severus rose slowly in the air, keeping an eye on the foolish brat. They floated around for an hour or so. Severus mostly watched Potter as he rolled, dove, spun, and showed off his athletic ability. Severus was lucky to remain seated on his broomstick. He had no idea how Potter managed to make it look so effortless. "Okay, this is the one that Ron told me about. Watch," Potter shouted. Severus watched as Potter rose dangerously high in the sky, at least triple Severus' own position, before angling his broom directly at the ground and zooming towards certain death. "Harry," Severus yelled, trying to speed towards the stupid brat. Potter just laughed and pulled hard on his broom handle, straightening himself at the last moment, but rolling off his broom and hitting the ground for his troubles. "Ow," Potter laughed, "I'm still working on it." "You are an idiot," Severus said, gritting his teeth so hard he thought he may have chipped a molar. "What on earth is wrong with you?" Potter picked his head up from the ground and looked surprised at the acid in Severus' tone. "What I do?" he asked, bewildered. "Almost broke your foolish neck," Severus said, landing gracefully next to Potter, who was still laying on the ground, now propped up on one elbow. "I'm going to get this done, then you won't be saying that," Potter laughed. "Practiced all night, did I? And once I didn't even fall at the end." "All night?" Severus eyed Potter carefully. He didn't appear sleep-deprived. He had energy in spades, his eyes were bright, and Severus had never known him to be in such high spirits. Are you not sleeping well? He asked cautiously. Merlin forbid Potter believe he was asking about his feelings and shut down. Potter just laughed and jumped to his feet. Dunno, I just don't really need to sleep. I'm too excited. Do you think this is how everyone feels on summer breaks? Oh. Severus was relieved that Potter himself had found the fitting explanation for his behavior. Last summer Potter had bounced between his friends' homes, never once finding the stability that the Muggle mind healer Severus a few months ago had said was so important for a child. This summer Potter had a home, one he owned himself in fact, and was becoming comfortable in his safety, security, and stability. Severus wished he hadn't obliviated the mind healer. The man had seemed as if he believed Severus was incapable of providing Potter with these feelings very quickly, and yet here they were. I am unsure, Severus hummed, though I am pleased that you seem to be having a good break. The best, Potter beamed at him, and once I figure out this move it'll be even better. I would prefer it if you practiced it during the daylight, Severus stressed, still shaken by the image of Potter speeding to certain death at the ground. Potter gave him a cheeky smile and shrugged, effectively communicating what he thought of Severus' suggestion. Severus sighed. Have you completed your homework, brat? Potter suddenly looked cagey and shifted around nervously. No, sir, he mumbled. Severus, he corrected the obstinate child. Come, let's take a break from flirting with death. You can work on your homework and then we can eat dinner before Mavis revolts against us. Okay, Potter agreeably grabbed his broomstick and bounced alongside Severus. So here's what Susan and I did today. Severus listened to Potter prattle on about adventures in Diagon Alley. Apparently Potter had convinced Susan Bones to follow him into Knockturn Alley, an image that had Severus groaning out loud as he imagined the many various problems that the boy who lived and the niece of the head of the DMLE could encounter in Knockturn Alley. So what do you think, can we? Severus shook his head and glanced at Potter. Apologies, I was caught up with how badly Amelia Bones would curse me if she knew Miss Bones was wandering around Knockturn Alley with you. Can you do what? Potter huffed but didn't lose his smile. Can we get a dog, please? Did you hear me say that I think the one we found was starving? I bought a huge steak from Tom for it, but what it really needs is a home. Though Severus could hear the empathy oozing from Potter at the description of a starving, homeless dog, he himself had a strong dislike of dogs, most four-legged animals really. He barely tolerated the cats that roamed Hogwarts. Absolutely not, Severus said. We already have one annoying owl, one irritating elf, and a moody teenager in our home. We hardly have space for a mangy dog. It would also be unable to return to school with us in September, as dogs are not officially allowed pets. Ron has a disgusting rat, Potter pointed out, and it's not on the official list either. A rat is much simpler to hide than a dog, Severus said logically. If I check the rulebook, and it doesn't specifically not allow dogs then, can I go back and try to find him? Severus glanced down and saw that Potter was staring up at him with ridiculously pleading eyes. Check the rulebook and we will discuss it, brat, Severus growled, unwillingly conceding to the pout. Please have a firm outline of what pets are and are not allowed at Hogwarts, Severus pleaded silently. Bastard, Potter smiled up at him. He placed a gentle hand on Potter's shoulder as they entered their home, and was internally discouraged to feel Potter tensing up beneath him. Not that relaxed then. I'm gonna go work on my essays, Potter said, ducking away from Severus' hand quickly. Severus nodded in acknowledgement as he moved to the sitting room, summoning his temporarily abandoned research after he settled in an armchair. He summoned a quill as he quickly scrawled down a possible equation that could assist him in changing the properties of the transfiguration base to a medicinal base when Severus Harry, hello. Son of a bitch. At this rate Severus would not be able to even get past the research portion to begin experimenting until Potter moved out. Severus moved in front of the newly lit flue, kneeling down to see that the person interrupting his research was none other than the Minister of Magic. Severus, oh thank Merlin you're home, the minister cried, looking harried. Severus supposed that one of the few official perks of being Harry Potter's guardian was his newfound first-name basis with the Minister of Magic. Cornelius, Severus said cordially, how can I help you? Is Harry there? Fudge asked quickly. He is, Severus said. Would you like me to fetch him? No, Fudge looked uneasy. I need to tell you that is you should be aware. Severus waited with as patient of a face as he possibly could. It would do him no favors to snarl at the minister to get on with it. Fudge took a deep breath and looked right at Severus. Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban. And just like that, Severus, summer visions of research, experiments, quiet evenings with Potter, and general peace disappeared. Chapter 3: Insanity and Illnesses. Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban. How? Severus asked tersely, swallowing down his shudder of revulsion at the mere thought. How could a madman such as Black escape from an impenetrable force such as Azkaban? The Dementors alone made the island a place of true nightmares and horrors. We aren't sure yet. He slipped out somehow last night, and they've combed every inch of the island today. He's definitely gone, Fudge said, but we think we know where he's headed. Severus closed his eyes and said it just as Fudge did. He's after Potter. He's looking for Harry. Fudge looked startled at Severus. Accurate guess. How did you know? Lucky guess, Severus said shortly. Why else would the Minister of Magic be fluing Severus with the news? Where else would Black be headed besides directly for Severus, personal magnet for all things dangerous and chaotic? I don't want you to unnecessarily panic, Severus, Fudge said, in what was undoubtedly meant to be a reassuring tone. We have the entire DMLE on the case, and I will personally assign protective detail to you and Harry both until Black is caught. I'm sure we'll find him quickly, and this will all just be a bad memory. Severus nodded, uncomprehending of the minister's words, as he created his own plans. Do you have a preference? What? Severus shook his head and refocused on the current conversation. Apologies, Minister, I got lost in thought for a moment. Preference for what? For a protective detail, Fudge said with an understanding look. If not, I'll just give you my best people. Kingsley Shacklebolt would be more than happy to volunteer. No, Severus said quickly, that won't be necessary. Severus hesitated as he considered the price of sacrificing his own already dwindling privacy with Potter's safety. Not necessary just yet, he corrected himself. My wards should prevent anyone from breaching our home, and I'm sure that Black will be caught quickly. Fudge nodded, seemingly relieved that Severus believed in the competency of the ministry. Which he absolutely did not. What he did firmly believe was that Sirius Black is an incompetent, brash, moronic fool who would not be able to evade capture for longer than a day. 2 max. No need to panic, I'm sure we'll get this wrapped up quickly, Fudge said with a strained smile. I'll keep you updated, he added before disconnecting abruptly. Severus stood up quickly and murmured, Hominem Revelio. He was reassured to see proof that Potter was the only other human presence in Severus' home. He doubted whether Black could penetrate even the most simple of Severus, multiple wards, but with the Daily Prophet sharing news of Severus' guardianship, one could never be too sure. The Daily Prophet shared news of Severus' guardianship. And Lily and James held their wedding at a beach, not 20 miles from Cokesworth, in order to make the drive more tolerable for Lily's parents. A wedding that Black had attended as the best man. Son of a bitch. Severus needed to get Potter out of Cokesworth. He was hit with a sudden stroke of genius. Why not get Potter out of the country entirely? Let Black reveal himself in the United Kingdom, only for Potter to be an ocean away in Italy. Zabini Villa, Severus called, now placing his own head in his flue. Mother, Blaze, Zabini yelled, upon seeing Severus' head appear in the fire of the sitting room where the boy was sprawled lazily on a sofa. Professor Snape would like to speak to you. How do you know it is not you that I wish to speak with? Severus asked. Is it? No, Severus admitted. Fetch your mother if she is not too busy. Too busy to speak with the proctor of my dearest Meraviglia? Never. Severus internally grimaced at the pet name he'd been dubbed with. The protector of the incredibly powerful, connected, and dangerous Italian Contessa's dearest marvel was as much of a threat as it was a soft sentiment. The Contessa gracefully situated herself in an antique chair, perfectly situated to accommodate flue calls. Severus made a mental note to do the same in his sitting room. Though he would never ooze the same effortless grace that the Italian royalty before him does, it would be convenient to no longer kneel on his hard floors. Contessa, Severus said, bowing his head respectfully, I apologize for the unannounced call. Nonsense, dearest Severus. I presume this is in regards to the recent escape of Sirius Black. Severus worked to keep the surprise off his face that the Contessa was already aware of the prison break. Clearly he did not succeed, because the Contessa laughed lightly. "Friends in high places, dear," she said. "Is my Meraviglia in danger?" "He is," Severus said bluntly. "Black sold Potter's parents to the Dark Lord 12 years ago, and Minister Fudge believes that he left Azkaban to finish the job. The British minister is an idiota, but in this case perhaps he is not wrong," the Contessa said thoughtfully. Severus believed that only someone with an incredible amount of magical power and political strength could get away with casually referring to the British Minister of Magic as an idiot. So the Contessa and Potter primarily. "Black has always had a recklessly violent streak," Severus told her. "If he finds Potter, he will undoubtedly attack him." "Oh, that'll be grand," Blaise chuckled, now out of Severus' sight. "He'll go the same way as Lockhart if Harry catches him." Severus immediately cleared both his mind and his face at Blaise's flippant observation that Potter was responsible for Lockhart's death. "Amati, perhaps you should go to your room and reflect on the wisdom of saying such unfounded remarks about our familiar and ally, yes." "Yes, mother, apologies, Professor," Blaise said sulkily. The Contessa flicked her wand behind her before turning back to Severus. "My Amati is many things, and a shameless snoop is one of them," she said pleasantly. "Now, how can I help you to protect our bambino?" "I had the thought that perhaps if Potter were not in the country, he would be much more difficult for Black to find," Severus said. "My guardianship of him was rather publicized, and Black likely has a general idea of where my home is located, so I thought—" "You thought that my Meraviglia would be safe in Italy, with his familiar, yes," the Contessa cut in smoothly with a charming smile. "Brillante, when shall I expect him?" Severus released the breath he hadn't been aware he'd been holding. He had hoped that the Contessa would accept Potter until Black was caught. He hadn't quite factored in that she would consider it a given, as she claims herself the child's familiar. "I haven't spoken to Potter about it yet," Severus admitted. "I wanted to ensure it was acceptable to you before I broached it with him." "Wonderful, then I shall hear from you, once you convince my Meraviglia of the many credible reasons to come stay with his familiar, yes." "Of course," Severus agreed. "I will go speak with Potter now and send you a message afterwards." "I look forward to seeing your fascinante fox soon, Severus," the Contessa said with another tinkling laugh before Severus disconnected from the flue. "Excellent, now all that remains is convincing Potter to temporarily relocate to Italy for part of his summer." Severus knocked on Potter's door frame, the door itself being left wide open. "What's up?" Potter mumbled distractedly, surrounded by wild stacks of parchment and books strewn across his bed. "Harry, I need to speak with you. It is rather important." Potter looked up at him, a quill in his mouth, and instantly looked wary. "Okay," he said hesitantly, "but just so you know, it was Mavis." Severus was temporarily distracted from his current goal by the inadvertent admission of wrongdoing. "What was Mavis?" he asked, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Oh," Potter flicked his eyes around his still blandly undecorated room. "Nothing, sorry, what's up?" Severus gave him another suspicious look, before reminding himself that a murderer after his ward was more important than whatever teenage mischief Potter had managed to get into. "How would you like to spend the remainder of the summer in Italy with Blaise and his mother?" Severus mentally crossed his fingers that Potter, for once in his entire life, would agree without argument. "No thanks," Potter muttered, turning back to his parchments. Severus sighed. Of course Potter would not agree easily. He tried a different tactic. "The Contessa has wrote to me that she wants to take you to the Italian Council and introduce you to powerful Wixen. I believe she even mentioned that there were Fae on the Council who may have new magic that they would be willing to teach you." Which, as outrageous as it was not a lie. The Contessa had wrote that very thing to Severus at the end of the school year, in an attempt to steal Potter from him for the holidays. Severus had not mentioned it to Potter before now in his own petty attempt to keep the child with him, instead of traipsing foreign countries. He felt no guilt, though, as he was certain that Blaise Zabini would have brought it up to Potter before now. Potter glanced up, and was now giving Severus his own suspicious look. "Are you trying to kick me out?" he asked. "If you need time alone, or want to have a friend over," Potter grinned and waggled his brows in a suggestive manner, "I can make myself scarce. I could even stay the night with Draco, but I don't want to leave for the whole summer." "What, Harry, no Merlin?" Severus sputtered at the suggestive implication as Potter turned his attention back down to his parchments. I just believe that sitting in this dreary house all summer is no proper vacation for you. Italy would have much more entertainment to offer a teenage boy. It's not dreary anymore, is it? Potter scoffed lightly. Surely you would enjoy the possibility of creating even more incredibly powerful political allies in Italy, Severus said, hopping to appeal to Potter's ambition. Potter finally set down his quill and looked up at Severus, now giving him his complete attention. Why are you trying to get rid of me? Severus sighed. Potter was much too cunning to attempt this without being blunt. I am not trying to get rid of you, he assured him, and I am certainly not trying to kick you out of your own home. He hesitated before deciding to just explain himself, praying that Potter did not explode and destroy the entire house. The minister called me. He informed me that Sirius Black escaped Azkaban last night, and he has sufficient reason to believe that Black is now looking for you. Potter blinked at him a few times before saying, So Black is dangerous, Severus said tersely. It would be safer if you were out of the country while they commence a manhunt for him. Potter quirked his lips up to the side, entirely unconcerned with this news. Maybe Black's after you, he said, widening his eyes in an attempt to look innocent. Maybe you should go to Italy for the rest of the summer. This is not a game, Potter, Severus snapped, irritated at Potter's blasé affect. Black was mad before he went to Azkaban. 12 years of being exposed to the effects of the Dementors will have done him no favors. He will try and find you, and he will try and kill you. Potter gave him an amused smile. He can try. Mr. Malfoy told me about what he did, sold my parents out to Voldemort, didn't he? I hope he finds me. I'd like to talk with him about that. I will go to Italy with you, Severus countered with quickly, ignoring Potter's thinly veiled death threat towards a dangerous killer. We could go together and come back when Black is caught. So Sirius Black could beat you in a duel? Potter asked with a smirk. I thought you said you were the best. I suppose that just boasting. Severus scoffed, unwillingly stepping directly into Potter's trap. Sirius Black couldn't kill me when I was 16, and he had a transformed werewolf on his side. He certainly couldn't do it now. Potter gave him a bright smile and picked his quill back up. Brill, sounds like we're staying then. Severus attempted to barter, threaten, and though he would never admit it, even beg Potter to reconsider. After 30 minutes, he slammed Potter's door behind him as he snarled, Then you can explain to the Contessa why you won't be making an appearance in her home this summer. He heard Potter's mockingly cheerful laugh as he stormed down the stairs. Don't be ridiculous, it's called a villa, Potter yelled. I'm going to Diagon Alley with Susan. Severus scrambled to his feet and threw his lab door open to stare at Potter incredulously. Are you mad? He asked him. Harry, you cannot leave right now, there is an escaped inmate after you. Surely Potter did not forget the conversation they had just the night before. Potter had his bag across his shoulder and he looked surprised at Severus' reasonable, if perhaps a bit sharply spoken, explanation. So, I think you're just working yourself up, he said. Ooh, I'll take my sword with me if you want. Potter looked ridiculously like an eager puppy at the idea of carrying around Lucius' blatant bribery of a gift with him to Diagon Alley. I am not working myself up, and you are not carrying around a sword, Severus grit, already feeling his first migraine of the day building. Why don't you have Miss Bones come here? Because we need to study in the library, Potter said slowly, and we told her aunt, the head of the DMLE, that we'd get lunch with her today. Severus quickly considered his options. He could attempt to force Potter to stay home, though the brat would probably just leave anyway. If he went back on his own damned words from the beginning of the summer, it may hurt the fragile trust Potter had in him. However, if he allowed Potter to leave, he would be at risk with Black on the loose. It was a quick decision of which Severus valued more Potter's mental health, which seemed to stabilize itself since becoming established at Spinner's End, or Potter's physical safety. Amelia will not allow her niece to be unprotected with Potter. If there were any person who would take Potter's safety as seriously as Severus, it was Amelia Bones. Very well, Severus acquiesced at his own reassuring thoughts. Be safe, you foolish brat. I would appreciate you returning home before dark tonight. I would rather take no chances until Black is captured. Brill, thank you, sir. Potter had all but lunged for the flu as Severus corrected him. Severus had been on pins and needles the remainder of the day. He told himself that Amelia would keep Potter safe, but Amelia was not aware of Potter's penchant for chaos, was she? Potter stole Nicholas Flamel's stone. He had broken a girl's wand for insulting him. He nearly tore apart the Slytherin common room in a fit of rage. he drove a sword through the mouth of a basilisk, and he had used that same sword to end the life of his professor who threatened his friends. If there was trouble to be found, Potter would find it. Which made Severus, relief at Potter's return home that night so strong it may as well have been palpable. "How was your day?" Severus asked calmly, subtly eyeing the boy for any possible injuries. "Brill," Potter said brightly, bouncing on his feet in the way that Severus has begrudgingly become accustomed to. "Got a lot done, did I?" Severus gave him an amused look. Potter was glancing around the room quickly, in a hyperactive way that made him believe the child had likely been indulging in junk food all day with his friend. "Let me guess," he said, "you aren't hungry?" "Nope," Potter smiled as he popped his pronunciation. "Gonna go study, good night." Severus shook his head. Clearly Potter had not accomplished much homework today if he still needed to study. He was pleased that he must have been acting like a typical teenager. If anyone deserved an opportunity to act their age, it was Potter. The next few days followed the similar pattern. Potter woke up, informed Severus he was leaving to spend the day with the Bones, and returned home after dinner, but before dark. Each night he immediately rushed off to complete his homework. "Perhaps you and Miss Bones should spend more time actually studying, and less time plotting mayhem," Severus suggested after the third night in a row of Potter frantically rushing to his room to work on essays. "Probably," Potter agreed easily with a laugh. "We'll do our best." Severus shook his head at him, relieved that Potter was having a normal holiday despite the very abnormal circumstances. On the fourth morning of Potter rushing out of the house, the moment sun broke, Severus felt comfortable enough with the protection Amelia was providing him to once again work on his research. He was fed up with rifling through old texts and convoluted journals. He would simply begin his own experiments with combining the bases today. Perhaps he was complicating it more than it needed. If he slowly added the transfigurative base potion to the medicinal one, there had to be a way to combine the properties of both while neutralizing the less desirable side effects. One of those less desirable effects being a painful death to any muggle who drank it. Severus inhaled the fumes of his lab, soaking in the rich scent of the burning embers beneath the cauldron. There was no smell in the world more grounding to him. As he measured, poured, tested, and continuously restarted the same process, Severus wondered if he should offer to let Potter work on this stage of the research with him. The boy was an adequate brewer, and this research would be a mere dream instead of a reality had it not been for Potter's donation of the basilisk. He grimaced as he considered the chaos that would occur in his lab if Potter were allowed in during his current perky state. In the air the child was graceful and nearly elegant. During a duel Potter was quick and lithe, and his every movement had a purpose. But now, Potter's extra energy, combined with the mild growth spurts Severus had been pleased to notice, has turned Potter into the exact wrong type of person to be allowed in a lab. It was painful to even imagine the child tripping and knocking over a cauldron filled with the temperamental brews. Perhaps he would wait to offer until Potter settled down and lost some of this rampant wild energy. He thought he was perhaps finally making some headway as the mixture he had just made, his 20-second test run of the day, emitted silver steam instead of the dark brown fumes the previous ones had. He was frantically writing down the differences in this batch when his insides turned to ice. Amelia Bones, Silver Lemur, drifted through his walls and stopped in front of him. "Potter!" Severus had already leapt to his feet, his wand clutched tightly in his hand, before the lemur even opened its mouth. "Severus, I wondered if you and your ward would like to have dinner with us this week. We can come to you if you would prefer, given the current difficulties. Let me know what day works best for you both." Severus stared at the spot where the lemur disappeared, attempting to comprehend the casual and carefully worded message from Amelia. He was relieved once he realized it was not a summons to St. Mungo's or the ministry or any other place that would mean Potter had been hurt. Though he was bemused to discover it almost sounded as if Amelia was not with Potter. Why would she offer to come to their home if she has had no difficulties having Potter with her the past few days? The more he considered Amelia's message, the quicker his bemusement changed into a cold anger. Stupid, reckless, inconsiderate brat. Severus cleared his mind of his rages against Potter in order to summon his own patroness. "If you wouldn't mind asking my ward what day works best for him, I can rearrange my schedule to fit his and give you a day." He counted slowly, focusing on his breathing as he waited for Amelia's response. He was reassured to see that it was nearly dark out, If Potter stuck to his own schedule, he should be returning shortly. Severus closed his eyes as Amelia's lemur returned with the confirmation of his fear. "I haven't seen your ward in about a week. Before the incident happened anyway," the lemur relayed in Amelia's worried voice. "Should I plan on seeing him today?" Severus thought there was likely not a curse in the world that did not run quickly through his mind. "Apologies, I must have my days mixed up. My ward is with one of their other friends. I will send you an acceptable day as soon as possible." Severus sat stiffly on the sofa, staring intently at the fireplace, mentally counting down the time until Potter's customary return. If the boy was even a second late, then Severus would go find him, wherever the hell he may be. When the minute hand fell into the 5-minute window that Potter typically arrived at, Severus found himself incredibly relieved to see green flames burst to life as Potter stumbled out of the fireplace. "I'm home," Potter yelled, incorrectly assuming Severus was in his lab, as had been his own habit recently. "Where have you been?" Potter jumped and spun around, momentarily looking incredibly guilty before he cleared his face masterfully. "Hello, didn't see you there. How's your research going?" he asked brightly. "Wonderful," Severus drawled. "I was able to get almost half a step closer to figuring out the equation I will need when I had an incredibly informative Patronus message." "Oh yeah, what kind of information?" "The specific formula for the cure to cancer." Potter was smiling, but Severus could detect the nervous undertone to his nonsense. He should be nervous, Severus though harshly. Potter had so little self-preservation skills that his cunningness and ambition alone must have carried him through to Slytherin. "Madame Bones sent me a message today," Severus said calmly, watching the colour drain from Potter's face. "She said that she wanted to know if we would be interested in having dinner with her and Susan one night this week." "Oh," Potter laughed. "Yeah, she mentioned that before and I told her I'd have to ask you since I know you're really busy." Severus tracked Potter as he began inching backwards towards the doorway. "Did you?" he hummed. "Because Amelia is quite certain she has not seen you at all this week, which I told her would be quite impossible considering she has been overseeing your personal safety for the last 4 days. Potter stumbled and looked up at Severus. "I had something to do. I forgot to go see Susan." "Do not lie to me," Severus hissed, furious that the child would stand there and lie straight to his face. "You forgot for the last 4 days in a row. Where were you?" The longer Potter stared silently at him, the more confident Severus was in his own instinctual guess. "You've been looking for Sirius Black." "Listen please," Potter pleaded, his eyes newly sparking with some form of agitation as he took a few steps closer to Severus. "I can find him, Snape, really I can. Look." Severus watched as Potter pulled stacks and stacks of parchments and newspaper clippings out of his bag. "See, look, I made a list of all the places I would probably be, like Diagon Alley in Surrey and downtown London. And then I tried to figure out how fast Black could be travelling if he doesn't have a broom, so I tried to do the math." Potter waved a sheet with numbers scrawled across it in his face. "And I decided to go to those places to look for him. But what if he's disguised, right? Just because he doesn't have his wand doesn't mean he doesn't own a wand, right? Or maybe he doesn't need one, makes sense, right? So any time I was anywhere and a muggle was giving me an odd look, I told my magic to remove their disguise so I could see if it was Black or not. Smart, right? So I marked off the places I've checked." Potter thrust a handful of parchments in Severus' arms. "And now I'm making a new list based on if he does have a broom, and even though that list is way longer, I can still do it, Snape. I can find him." Severus stared at Potter with what he was sure was entirely unconcealed shock. "Harry, you sound mad," he said softly. "You've been traveling to various locations on your own and using magic on muggles. You could be arrested." Potter didn't even appear concerned. He laughed at the thought. "I won't be arrested. Nobody even knows it was me, do they? And if they did, I don't think they could even catch me to arrest me. I'm not mad, I know what I'm doing." Once upon a time, Severus would have sneered at such arrogant words coming from Potter's mouth. But the way he said it, his eyes bright and his chest heaving from his excitement, he didn't sound arrogant. He sounded as if he truly believed in his own invincibility. Have you taken anything?" Severus asked. He grimaced when he clarified, "Alcohol, muggle drugs, or any illicit potions." "That's ridiculous," Potter scoffed. "I'm not on drugs, I have to do this. You get it right. Do you want to help me? We could find him together. Ooh, and you can apparate us so we can check way more places, way quicker." Potter grabbed one of the many parchments that had fallen to the floor and began digging in his bag as he rambled. Okay, so we should check countries that don't have extrication laws set up with us, because if you were a fugitive, wouldn't you go there first? That's what Hermione said anyway. She said, "Don't worry, Harry, I'm sure he went somewhere where there aren't extrication laws." And I honestly don't know what that means, but if Hermione thinks he might be there, then we should check. Then we should check places that are bright and sunny and warm, because everyone says Azkaban is dark and cold and gloomy. And where is my quill? Severus had never been struck dumb quite as badly, as he was listening to Potter rave on like a lunatic, as he upended his bag in search of a quill. What the fuck? Severus flicked his wand at Potter, who looked up as the spell made contact with him, and grabbed the parchment that appeared quickly out of the air. Current diagnoses. None. End of report. Severus wished that there was a drug or potion listed. Potter's sneaking elixir of euphoria, or muggle amphetamines, would be better than this blank sheet of parchment. There is no charm in the world to diagnose madness. What's that? Potter asked, fearlessly snatching the form out of Severus' very surprised hand. What's a current diagnosis? Potter furrowed his brow momentarily before pointing accusingly at Severus. I told you I'm not on drugs, I'm fine. He is absolutely not fine. When is the last time you slept? Severus asked gently. Potter hadn't been sleeping well at the beginning of last week. Had the insomnia continued to the point of driving Potter mad from a lack of sleep? He appeared energetic, but Severus truly had no other reasonable explanation ready for Potter's current behavior. Last night, Potter said quickly. How long did you sleep last night? Why does it matter? Potter kicked over a stack of parchments on the floor. I'm not tired, I'm fine. Harry, you don't sound fine. Severus spoke very softly to this version of Potter that he wasn't sure how to handle. You sound insane. Are you feeling stressed over the situation with Black? Severus could have cursed himself for the phrasing. He knew better. But Potter's rambling madness had him severely wrong-footed. Potter immediately snatched his papers out of Severus' arms with a narrow-eyed look of disdain. I am not insane, and I am not feeling anything, he sneered. You are stressed, I am fine. Potter turned on his heel and stormed through the doorway. Severus listened as he stomped up the stairs and slammed his bedroom door shut behind him. Severus put up a privacy charm before quickly summoning his patroness. Amelia, if the minister is still amenable, I believe that an aura for Potter's protection would be an excellent decision. Severus had absolutely no idea what was going on with Potter, but he was entirely certain that the chaotic brat would certainly attempt to sneak off again. And this time, Severus would ensure that he had a protective detail trailing him. Discreetly, of course. Merlin forbid Potter believes Severus is concerned for his well-being. Severus had thought that a summer break with a perkily cheerful Potter was irksome. He wished he could go back to such a simple time. Potter had maintained an irritated, frenzied energy for several days after Severus confronted him about his activities. Thankfully, Potter seemed to have given up, albeit likely only temporarily, on his mad hunt for Black. Instead, he apparently was focused on making Severus as miserable as possible. Severus wasn't sure if this was purposeful, or a happy coincidence on Potter's part. Potter rose before the sun and went out back every morning to fly. Severus had set a ward to alert him when the back door was open, and twice since their confrontation 3 days ago, Potter had been out back before 5 o'clock. Potter was channeling his frenzied energy and attempting riskier and riskier stunts on his broom. Severus began to fear that Black was a secondary threat to Potter behind the child himself. There is no activity on our end. We have no new leads. HP has remained within the wards, though you may consider raising the wards skyward, as he seems determined to graze against the uppermost limits on his broom. Yes. After 4 days of watching Potter spend his entire day spiraling across the yard on his broom, after watching Potter heal himself of his third broken arm, and after receiving a note from Shacklebolt implying he was not caring properly for Potter, Severus had enough. He could not spend another day holding his breath as Potter raced towards the ground, nor another afternoon attempting small talk, while Potter raced through lunch before flinging himself back outside. Harry, why don't you visit Luna tomorrow? Severus suggested at dinner that evening. She would undoubtedly enjoy the company. It would be more work for Shacklebolt to trail Potter to the Lovegood, but after his note this morning, Severus wasn't feeling very charitable. Can't, Potter said shortly, taking quick bites of his meal. I'm way behind on homework, aren't I? Plus my project, plus all the other stuff I have to get done. Luna'll be here in a couple weeks anyway for the party. What project? Severus asked conversationally, keeping his eyes on his own meal in an effort to lull Potter into a conversation. "Please do not say hunting Sirius Black. Not that you probably care anymore, but I still have to make those charmed notebooks before Nev's birthday, and I'm painting my bedroom." Severus glanced up hopefully at the mention of the notebooks. He had quite forgotten, in the mess that Sirius Black has created, that Potter requested his help with creating notebooks that 9 children could communicate through. The fact that Potter and his gang got the idea from the Dark Lord's diary was disturbing, but a healthy enough project for Potter to focus his energy on. He was also relieved that Potter was finally decorating his bedroom. It would add a sense of stability to the erratic child's life. "I would be delighted to help you with your project," Severus said honestly, though not too eagerly to be suspicious to the cunning child. "We could do it tomorrow." "Oh, you're not too busy with your research, and setting the police to follow me to help." "Shacklebolt is hardly the police," Severus said, maintaining his casual tone despite his shock. "Kingsley Shacklebolt is an expert in the field at concealment." "Supposedly. Or a Shacklebolt is here at the minister's request," Severus said, twisting the truth. "As Black has still not been captured, it is apparently prudent to the minister for his mate Harry Potter to be protected." "If you'd let me go find Black, then we wouldn't need protected," Potter muttered so quietly that Severus was able to take a drink in a well-timed effort to pretend he hadn't heard him. He had been avoiding the topic since their disagreement earlier in the week, and he was not keen on rehashing it now. "Regardless of Shacklebolt assignment here, I am not too busy with my research to help you. I told you I would and I will. Would you like to begin after breakfast tomorrow?" "Sure, if you have time," Potter shrugged. Severus had planned on spending another day at the table, half a mind on his research, and the other half on Potter's death-defying tactics outside the kitchen window. This project would be an excellent distraction for the both of them. "I can always find time when needed," he said, giving Potter a small smile. Potter smiled back, and Severus felt as if though a tentative truce had been made. Severus sat at the kitchen table the next morning, patiently waiting for Potter to come downstairs. He had been surprised and pleased that Potter had not went outside before the sun was up and instead was still in his room when Severus rose at 6. "Master Potter is still sleeping?" Mavis asked, quietly creeping into the kitchen. Mavis was thinking Master Potter was never going to be sleeping again. Severus hummed in agreement. This was the latest that Potter has slept in the last week and a half. "He was bound to crash eventually," Severus said. "I am going to attempt to get caught up on work before he wakes up. Will you come get me when he does?" "If Mr. Snoop eats his weird pastry, then Mavis will be getting him as soon as Master wakes up," the elf said, eyeing the empty place setting in front of Severus slyly. Severus thought that Potter's elf would be much more tolerable if it had not adopted Potter's own bargaining economy system. "Yes, I will take a weird pastry with me to my lab if you agree to inform me once Potter wakes up." Mavis eagerly thrust a plate of multiple Chelsea buns in Severus' hand and ushered him out with promises of a big lunch. Hopefully Potter's appetite would improve with the extra sleep he was now catching up on. And in the meantime, Severus would work on outlining the research he had compiled so far for Wayne to pursue and compile with his own research. "I will continue altering the standard equations in an attempt to find the correct one for the base. I look forward to studying the materials you have compiled." Severus Snape. Severus checked the time after finishing collecting his portion of their research, and had it bundled and prepared for Sevi to deliver to Wayne tomorrow morning. He was startled to see that it was already 11:30. "Mavis is a snaky meddling." "You said you would come get me when Potter woke up," Severus snapped harshly at the elf in the kitchen. "We had a deal, Mavis." "Mavis is sure Mr. Snoop is not talking to Mavis about breaking a deal," the elf muttered, aggressively kneading dough on the kitchen counter. "Mavis is being a good elf and is letting Master Potter sleep because Master Potter is needing his rest, and Mavis is keeping his deal because Mavis is not a liar." "Potter is still asleep?" Severus asked, double-checking the time. It was unlikely that he'd incorrectly cast a simple spell such as Tempest, but much more unlikely that Potter had slept for 13 hours. "Master is still sleeping, and if Snoop is knowing what is good for Master, he will be letting him sleep," Mavis grumbled. "Master is needing sleep so that Master is not crazy anymore." Mavis' hands suddenly fluttered above the dough as the little elf looked up at Severus. "Mavis is not meaning to say such a bad thing about Master Potter. Mavis is not meaning it," he squealed. Of course not, Severus quickly assured him. Potter would have a conniption fit if the elf give himself a black eye on Severus. Watch. You are quite right, Potter needs to sleep. I'll just go check on him, shall I? Severus crept quietly up the stairs. If Potter was still asleep, he did not want to wake him. Merlin knows the child has plenty of sleep to make up for. Harry, he said softly, opening Potter's door and sticking his head inside. Are you asleep? Potter was curled on his side, burrowed beneath his quilt, and only identifiable by his hair. Potter didn't respond, so Severus quietly walked up beside the bed and saw that he was indeed still asleep. This is what happens when you refuse to sleep for so long, you foolish child, Severus murmured. He spotted Potter's stack of notebooks on the dresser as he made to quietly retreat from the room. He snagged them and thought perhaps Potter would be pleased if he could find the correct combination of charms while he was resting. It would give him something to do while Potter slept anyway. Severus went to check on Potter around 3, frustrated with his lack of progress on the project, and officially concerned that perhaps Potter was ill instead of just tired. Harry's, he knocked before opening the door. Are you awake? Yeah, Potter said softly from his bed. What are you doing? Severus flicked on the lights. Are you unwell? Think so, Potter said quietly. Severus stepped up beside his bed and eyed him critically. Potter was laying on his side, staring off towards his closet door. His skin looked to be a normal color, and his eyes, which were unobscured by the glasses on his nightstand, seemed clear. Would you like a potion? I can grab a pep-up potion, Severus offered. No, I'm tired, I just want to sleep. All right, well, I'll just have Mavis bring you some soup. You may feel better after eating. "Kay," Potter murmured, closing his eyes. Severus hesitated before closing the door behind him. He could freely admit that while medicinal research is an area of high interest to him, dealing with actual sick patients has never been something he had the patience for. He would send a potion up with Mavis and check on Potter before retiring for the evening. Potter would likely feel better soon. Wixen had hardier immune systems than Muggles. They were able to recover quicker from any minor illnesses. Call for me if you need anything, he offered quietly, closing the door behind him. By the third day of Potter lethargically laying in his bed, eating the bare minimum and speaking even less, Severus had to admit that perhaps Potter did not have a summer flu. Harry, what specific symptoms do you have? Severus asked that morning after Potter refused to get out of bed. I dunno what you mean, Potter groaned, rolling onto his back away from the light Severus conjured for the dark room. Do you feel hot? Does your stomach hurt? What exactly is causing you to feel sick? Severus explained. I'm tired and my head hurts, said Potter. Go away. I cannot go away while you are sick, Severus sighed. Would you like a pain-relieving potion? It's not that kind of hurting, it's like... Potter gave him a wary look. Never mind, I just have a headache. This is what you get for calling him mad last week. If you can describe it to me, I may have a potion to fix it, Severus said, hopping to cajole him into speaking. Potter blinked up towards the ceiling as he quietly explained. It's like there's too many thoughts, and I can't get them to be quiet, and it's making my head hurt. Severus grimaced in understanding. I do not believe a pain reliever will help in this case, he said carefully. Harry, I believe you are depressed, which is common and is not a weakness or an insult. You would feel better if you got up and ate a real meal. He looked at Potter's tangled locks and perhaps a shower. No, Potter said shortly, rolling to face the wall away from Severus. I'm going back to sleep. Severus sighed as he left Potter's room. He would get Potter out of bed tomorrow. After the 5th day of trying to coax Potter out of bed, with no results, Severus began a new approach. Outright bribery. If you would like, I could accompany you and Miss Bones to Diagon Alley today. Potter grunted, laying on his back and staring at the ceiling, not even deigning to reply at Severus' suggestion. You said that you would like to duel this summer. We could do that today. Yeah, maybe later. Severus tried to think of anything that Potter may find interesting. There is a shop in Nocturne Alley you may be interested in. I believe Borgin has a much-envied wall of weapons. Severus would sorely regret it if Potter took him up on this offer, though if it got the child out of bed, it would be worth it. I'm sick, Potter whispered. Not today. Potter sounded sick, but Severus knew it was a sickness of the mind, not body. It is a nice day out. Perhaps you would like to go risk your life on your death trap of a broomstick. It would make you feel better, Harry, Severus said softly. "I'm too tired," Potter mumbled. Severus took a deep breath before pulling out what he hoped would be his trump card. "If you would still like to adopt that dog, I am willing to speak with Hagrid about keeping it on the grounds when we return to school. We could go find it today." "I don't want to," Potter said, rolling to his side and facing away from Severus. Severus tried patience, he had tried bribes, he had tried being gentle, and now he was out of patience. "You cannot stay in your bed forever, Potter," he said sharply. "You have to get up, you need to shower, you need to eat. Get up." "I don't feel good, all right. Is that what you want from me? To know I'm weak, just go away," Potter yelled, his voice strained and dull. Severus shouldn't have been surprised when he was shoved from Potter's room, and had the door slammed shut in his face, without Potter even lifting his head from his pillow. But Potter's magical strength was both impressive and startling, even when the child himself was clearly suffering. Severus took several steadying breaths and counted slowly as he considered the best course of action to take. Potter is ill and requires treatment, much like any other sick child. Which left him with minimal choices. St. Mungo's would give Potter a cheering charm and plaster the information across the front page of the paper by the next morning, which would be unacceptable. Severus decided that his past time to seek out the Muggle mind healer he had consulted with after Potter's guardianship was approved. The man had offered acceptable advice once before, surely he could do it again. He would just go tomorrow, get advice on how to handle a Potter who is clearly depressed for any one of many possible reasons, then return home and begin putting Potter together again. He looked at Potter's door as he hesitated. Make an appointment first, find someone to come watch Potter second. "Severus, how are you? How is Mr. Potter?" Narcissa immediately asked with a bright smile upon answering his flu call the very next morning. "He isn't still hunting for my cousin, is he?" "How did you know about that?" Severus sputtered, caught off guard by the greeting. Narcissa's smile sharpened slightly as her grey eyes glittered. "He asked Lucius for copies of the laws regarding what happens if you kill someone who is trying to kill you," Narcissa laughed. "He also asked about the legalities of using an unforgivable if it was silent, wandless, and impossible to trace. It wasn't difficult to piece together. And yet you refrained from informing me that my ward was spending his days combing the streets for a detached lunatic," Severus asked tightly. Narcissa looked surprised at Severus' agitation. "Apologies, Severus, we believed that you were likely assisting him, given your history with Sirius. You truly believed I would allow Potter to seek out a confrontation with Black. What we believe is that Harry is much more of a threat to Sirius than he is to Harry," Narcissa said with a sly smile. "I shudder to imagine the justice Harry will attempt to extract if they meet." Severus did not believe that Narcissa shuddered at the thought. Narcissa looked entirely too amused at the thought, as if Potter confronting a murderer would be comical instead of horrifying. "Yes, a delightful image, thank you, Narcissa," Severus drawled, returning to the conversation. "Apologies, darling," she said, her small smile still firmly in place. "Was there something else I can do for you, aside from expediting your impending grey hairs?" Severus snorted at the jab. He was already well aware that if he lived to see Potter become an adult, he would only do so with a copious amount of grey hair and chronic migraines. "Yes, actually," he said. "I have an important appointment this afternoon, and I was hoping you would be available to come stay with Potter during my absence." Severus had carefully considered his choices for an appropriate Potter sitter. Shacklebolt, who was stationed outside their home, would likely send Potter into a panic if he believed he were being left alone with a cop. Amelia may believe Severus to be an unfit guardian if she saw the state Potter was in. Lucius was bound so tightly to Potter socially and politically that he would hardly force the child to eat or interact with him while Severus was gone. Which left Narcissa as the only other local friend Severus could trust. Narcissa was gentle, with children, yet firm as a mother. She would ensure Potter was safe, and would find a way to force him to eat and talk without Potter even realizing he had done so. "Of course," Narcissa agreed immediately. "I would be delighted. Perhaps Draco will accompany me. The boys could fly or gossip or whatever it is teenagers get up to these days." "Perhaps not," Severus said hesitantly. Potter would not take kindly to his friends seeing him in his current state. "Potter is ill," he prevaricated. "Oh, and what terrible illness dares to plague the son of a potions master?" "Potter is not my son," Severus scowled, and the kind of illness that there are no potions to cure him of. Ah, Narcissa suddenly looked entirely too familiar with Severus' vague description. James' mother was a black, I forget sometimes. Severus' knees were beginning to ache from his position on the floor, and he had no patience for Narcissa's arbitrary commentary on Potter's paternal line. Your point, Sissa. The black madness, Narcissa said patiently, as if explaining something incredibly complex to a child. It is rather hereditary. Potter is not mad, Severus hissed, insulted by the very implication he had been worrying over since the beginning of Potter's episode. He's just got a lot going on. Of course, darling, my mistake, Narcissa said with a polite smile. What time will you be expecting me? Severus mentally calculated the time it would take him to apparate to London and travel, without magic, to the mind healer's office. Will 2 o'clock work for you? Perfectly, Narcissa said agreeably. Is the password still Sevi? Yes, Severus said shortly. And don't you dare call Potter mad or any variety of the word while you are here, he added. You must be feeling incredibly brave to insinuate that I would dare hurt that poor child's feelings while I am a guest in his home, Narcissa said, her tone suddenly cool and her eyes hard. Apologies, he said quickly, reconsidering his own words. Of course you wouldn't. I am suffering from a lack of sleep, forgive my slight. Narcissa inclined her head slightly at him, replacing her cold mask with a slighter warmer, and much more socially polite one. Of course, darling, you're simply worried about your ward. I will allow you time to go check on him and rest before I arrive at 2. Severus gave her a genuine thanks before disconnecting. Narcissa may be excellent with children, and a socially perfect lady for the House of Malfoy, but Severus oftentimes forgot that she was also a black, and as she said, their madness was quite hereditary. By 2:30 that afternoon, Severus had left Shacklebolt and Narcissa in charge of Potter's safety, and was now seated on a sofa preparing to discover how to fix the broken child. Tell me what is going on in your life, Mr. Snape. Severus took a steadying breath before he began explaining. I recently became the guardian on the orphaned son of my close friend from school. Harry is my student, which is how we became acquainted, and I am worried that he may be ill, and I am unsure how to assist him. Would you like to tell me about him? Would I be here if that was not my plan? Severus thought acerbically. Severus explained Potter's entire history, editing in the cases where magic was involved. He now regrets having obliviated the mind healer after the first time he sought his advice. Telling Potter's history was both time-consuming and quite depressing. I believe he is now depressed, Severus said after explaining Potter's current behavior. He has had depressive episodes before, understandably considering what he has been through, though they have never lasted this long nor have they ever caused him to develop this lethargic disinterest in life. The Muggle hummed thoughtfully. And this has been going on for 5 days, you said? Yes. Tell me more about the argument you had with Harry about him sneaking out before this started. Do you believe that our disagreement, for it was not an argument, may have triggered Harry's current state? The Muggle chuckled. Some depressive episodes have what you are referring to as triggers, but most of them, Mr. Snape, can be caused by nothing at all aside from the chemicals in our brains. So Harry is mad, Severus said, slumping in his seat knowing the Muggle would never remember his appearance after he left, which left him free to be as informal as he would like. Mad, insane, and crazy are all derogatory ways of referring to someone with mental illness, the Muggle said. His tone was still gentle, yet there was a sharpness as he spoke now. Referring to Harry as mad is untrue and unhelpful. He is just as ill as a person suffering from the flu would be. What is wrong with him? Severus asked, desperation unwittingly lacing his tone. How do I help him? It's impossible for me to definitively diagnose your ward without speaking with him, the Muggle said softly once again. Severus truly did not have time for this. He needed to know what was wrong with Harry in order to heal him. He fingered the wand in his pocket and silently placed a light compulsion charm on the Muggle. I would like your best guess then, he said curtly. La folie circulaire, the Muggle immediately responded. The French called it circular insanity. Today it is referred to as manic-depressive illness. Manic-depressive illness, Severus repeated impassively. I have never heard of this. And he has certainly done an extensive amount of research into mental health in the last 2 years. It is only now beginning to be used as an official diagnosis, and rarely on someone so young, but Harry fits the criteria, the Muggle said. It is just as the name suggests, unpredictable episodes of alternating mania and depression. Would you like to talk about why you appear so surprised by this? No, Severus said shortly. He had not made the appointment to discuss himself. I would like you to explain more about this illness and why you believe Harry has it. Of course, the Muggle agreed quickly. Severus was thankful once again for being a wizard. He could not imagine how Muggles sat through these appointments, never getting their questions answered and incessantly pressured to talk about themselves. Manic depressive illness is not a new illness, but rather only now has an official diagnosis. Because the manic episodes often look like intense euphoria and happiness, it was difficult to identify those episodes as a symptom. I'm baking. You allowed Potter to behave erratically for days because you missed this. Severus castigated himself silently as he listened to the Muggle's explanation. You said Harry was barely sleeping and was behaving oddly, an inflated feeling of invincibility. I don't think they could even catch me to arrest me. An increase in risky behavior. Attempting human transfiguration alone is dangerous enough. Doing it in the air, on a broomstick, borders suicidal. And increased hyperactivity are all very common red flags of a manic episode. Frankly, I'm surprised Harry hasn't exhibited manic behavior like this before. I'm going to fix Hermione, and I'm going to talk to Theo, and I'm going to kill the basilisk, and everything's going to be okay, right? You missed this. Because of Harry's history, I believe it is likely he has an undersized prefrontal cortex, which, yes, controls and regulates emotions. I am aware, Severus said shortly, having been through this before with the unknowing Muggle, and this causes the illness. Not necessarily, the Muggle said. All those with the illness that have undergone research testing before now have similarly undersized prefrontal cortex, but not every person with an undersized prefrontal cortex will develop the illness. There is also a genetic factor. James' mother was a Black, I forget sometimes. The Black madness, it is rather hereditary. With Harry's orphan state, it is unlikely if we will ever know the genetic connection in his life, the Muggle continued, oblivious to Severus' own failings. The youngest patients we have are all older than Harry by a good 2 or 3 years. Considering Harry's extensive trauma, it is not surprising that he developed the illness early. It is often the case in severely abused and victimized children. You missed this. How do we fix him? Said Severus. The Muggle gave him a sympathetic look at Severus' choked voice, a look wholly unappreciated by Severus. I do not deserve sympathy, I missed this. You do not need to fix him, he isn't broken, the Muggle said gently. He needs therapy and medication. What medication? Severus asked quickly. If there was anything that Severus understood as a potions master, it was medication. Potter would hardly agree to therapy. He was barely speaking with Severus as it is, but he could barter with the child to get him to take medicine. The diagnosis is too new to have an approved treatment course as of yet, the Muggle said with a frown. The patients who have been treated have been done during clinical trials as adults. I'm afraid that our country is simply too behind on mental illnesses to have a medication that a child Harry's age can take. So therapy is your only recommendation? Severus asked hopelessly. Therapy for an illness that you cannot even definitively diagnose him with? Perhaps in a year or so, when our information catches up to the French, we can find a medication to help correct the chemical imbalance in Harry's brain, but for now therapy and a stable routine will be your best options. Do nothing then, do nothing and hope that dragging Harry to your office is the best way to treat him, Severus scoffed. Unacceptable. Not do nothing, the Muggle disagreed. You continue just as you have, offer stability, support, and try to avoid things that could possibly trigger an episode. Once an episode begins, you'll need to keep a close eye on Harry. Manic episodes seem less dangerous because Harry appears happy, but they can be just as self-destructive as the depressive episodes. Explain, Severus said. How is Harry baking and playing sports just as dangerous as him refusing to leave his bed? The Muggle leaned forward slightly, warmed up to the subject if his eager tone was anything to go by. Harry is a teenage boy, they aren't known for their self-control, but from what we've seen in our own research and in the more extensive French trials, patients in manic episodes don't just have diminished impulse control, Mr. Snape, they have none. If Harry believes himself to be invincible and thinks, I should jump off the roof because I think I can fly, then he will. Severus closed his eyes as he could imagine the scenario all too well. Potter attempting to transfigure his own eyes 50 feet in the air, Potter tracking down the man who caused his parents' death. Potter jumping off a roof would be a best-case scenario. If you'd like, we can schedule a session for Harry later this week, perhaps even a family therapy session. Mental illness can be taxing on the entire household, the Muggle offered as their session timer rang. That will not be necessary, Severus said, rising to his feet. Harry will never agree to it, and I do not require it. Severus faltered as he went to obliviate the Muggle before leaving the office. It had taken up quite some time explaining Potter's past, and it would be simpler if he did not need to go through this again. Particularly if he could convince Harry to consult a professional. I will schedule an appointment if Harry agrees, he conceded, closing the door firmly behind him. La folie circulaire. Potter could never catch a break.